Welcome back, my friends, to the Rebirth podcast. I have one of my dear sisters, dear friends, favorite humans on the planet here with me today to talk about the womb. But we're going to strip it down today and peel back layers and go very much basics foundation around languaging and the language we use so often, both in my work, in her work, and why it matters in terms of what we're meaning when we're saying these things, why it matters, and really like giving people a portal to enter into, a bridge to bridge the gap and to connect. Maybe those who are newer to this work and are kind of like, wait, what the heck are you saying? Or kind of unsure. Maybe this can bring some peace and some safety and some anchoring to the body, but also for leaders to listen to and recognize and pause for a minute of, wait, why am I saying the things that I'm saying? And do I need to have a moment of pause to make sure that my community and the people that really do crave and desire and yearn for this work, do they understand what I'm saying? Or am I just speaking to my peers who are already in this space? So I have my dear friend, Amanda Rose, here today, coppery, fiery, sex goddess, enchantress extraordinaire. Hello, Amanda. Welcome.
Hello, Olivia. Wow, what an introduction. I'm blushing.
Just like in this, I wish you guys could see the video right now. Maybe I'll put this on YouTube, but you're just like in such a vibe right now. Your beautiful fireplace behind you, your sexy robe. You're just, a casual Saturday morning. Hello. Casual.
That's right. Cash, so cash, darling. So
Oh my
cash.
gosh. Will you introduce yourself for those who don't follow you yet or don't know you yet? Make sure to tell them your Instagram if they want to put a face to a name and to a voice as you're speaking.
My name is Amanda Rose, as Olivia said, and my Instagram is Amanda Arlene Rose, all together. And who I am is yet a borning. I like to steal the quote from Clarissa Pinkola Estes and say that who I am is yet a borning. All I know is that I'm very friendly, but not quite tame. And I work with women who know that they are called to embody the new paradigm, that they're here to usher in a new legacy. A new legacy of motherhood, of spirituality, of what it means to be an embodied feminine leader, of what it means to be a wife, a mother, a daughter, friend, what it means to be sexual, what it means to be emotional, and what it means to be a wild woman. So I'd say it's like a broad description. And yet, if this resonates with you, you'll know who you are.
Amen. Oh, I just love it. I mean, I talk with Lauren about this a lot too. And I know you guys are recently connected, which makes me so happy. Like all my favorite people are connecting and collaborating. And we do such similar work. Like I could have taken that exact thing and posted it on my website and been like, this encapsulates the work that I do. Yet also it's so vastly different and has different expressions and different energetic signatures that are made up from our past experiences and from what's led us here and the differences in our lives as well. So we have these like, the red thread that weaves us together and makes it so similar, but also is so different in many ways. So I'm curious before we get let's start with this in terms of, because we only have like 30 minutes. I'm like trying to keep an eye on the time. There's so much we could unpack here about our past, your story. We talked about Christianity. We talked about purity culture. We talked about these different pieces, and we might weave those in as these past layers.
All before we hit record.
I know that. Why do we do that? We do that every time. But what do you mean, curious, by new paradigm? For those that are like, what the heck does new paradigm mean?
That's a beautiful place to start. By new paradigm, I'm looking at legacy. I'm looking at culture. I'm looking at the way that we've been raised as women to operate in the world, and honestly, men. We've been raised looking at things through, I think, a very black and white lens. This is how things are. They just are this way. Don't question. And the new paradigm is where we hold both the black and the white, and we allow for the gray. We allow for the mystery and the nuance. We're okay with not having all the answers, not having everything figured out. And I could go into like, I guess, a technical definition of what paradigm means, but I think it can be felt just through like more of an energetic description, if you would. we're not following the same traditions of our forefathers. Yes, we honor tradition, we honor where we come from, but we know that tradition is not actually meant to be passed down exactly the same from generation to generation. It's actually meant to be dynamic. It's meant to be able to grow and morph as we do. To change with the generations, for us to then add our own traditions. And really, I feel that I am someone who creates new traditions, and I take and I blend from the old, but I really feel called to create new traditions for myself, for my future family, and to encourage other women to create their own traditions, whether that's traditional holidays, a traditional way of breaking bread, of sitting down and having a meal, traditional way of doing business, motherhood, partnership,
ritual.
Yeah, right. And I feel like all of that really is part of what a new paradigm is. It's creating a life on our terms that serves us, instead of seeing there's this actually drawing on my Christian roots of in the Bible where it says, or Jesus is saying that, man was not created for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was created for man. And I feel like we often see tradition that way, that we think that we were created for tradition. And we have to fit into however this is, or we were created for the practices. I often tell my clients, the practice is for you, not you for the practice. And I think tradition is the same, that we were not created for the traditions to serve them, to honor them, to keep them sacred and untouched, but the traditions were created to serve us. And it's time that we take those back and create a new paradigm where we're allowed to be sovereign and self-embodied. We're not enslaved to these old ways of doing things, and we're allowed to be free thinkers and seekers and pilgrims of our own. We're allowed to forge a new way to be to break through these old I don't know what the word is, barriers. I'm picturing like these barriers they put like on the side of like the highway, like don't go this road,
right?
And we have permission, and I want to give permission to absolutely break through those barriers and take the road less traveled, or take the road that people say don't take, or just plow through the woods and create your own, for crying out loud. You look back, how did people used to migrate and create new worlds? They used to be unafraid to leave everything behind and to travel and to venture forth. And I think that we're coming into a new era of that, especially as women, where we're no longer afraid. We know choosing ourselves is going to birth the legacy we want. And we're no longer afraid to leave everything behind if it's what's required of us. And so I think that this really is part of what the new paradigm looks like. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything else needs to fall and needs to be scrapped out and thrown away. We can take what we value from the old system, from the old paradigm, the old traditions, but we have permission to make it ours.
Powerful. I'm just laughing at how we could ever make this a 30-minute podcast. First question, and we're like 7 minutes in. Oh my God, that was so powerful. But it's true. I mean, it's interesting because I was just watching Vikings again, which I was telling you about, because I'm so connected to it because it's so much of like my ancestry. I'm Norwegian, Scottish, Danish, all of that up there. And it's so interesting because they would do that. I watched the last season where Uba's taking his family and leaving everything behind and going to find a new world, going to find the promised land, going to create a new community, a new way of life for his family that's better than what they're leaving, and like starting a new legacy, which is so powerful. And I go back to even what you were saying in the mystery in the new paradigm, the nuance, the curiosity, and welcoming that. And isn't that so true? Isn't it so true that it's very much how I view birth in my work, right? I view birth as we're coming back to embodying and leaning into and surrendering to and welcoming the mystery that it is. Being curious about what the body is saying, being curious about what's unfolding, but not forcing or controlling or trying to fit it into rules or a box or, you know, how it should look. And instead we're surrendering to the mystery that it is. We are creating a new paradigm of birth, which is funny because it's very much how our ancestors did it. And we're reclaiming that. And I picture it as like, chiseling away the pieces that we have added onto it that actually are not serving women at the bottom line, are not serving the greater and higher good of us. It's actually serving the system, serving the man, serving the patriarchal hijacking of medicine and of women's bodies and of our autonomy. So it brings us into kind of the next term that I want to unpack is what it means to be wild. Because I know we both use that word a lot in our work of coming back to the wild woman within, rewilding. And I'm so curious how you define that. And then I can share how I define that.
When I think of wild, I think of something growing and thriving in its natural habitat. I think of something that hasn't been domesticated. So like if I think of like a wild rose, for example, I love this example because my name. And
mine too.
Yours also?
Our middle names, yes.
Our middle names. How beautiful is that? It's actually my maiden name.
I know, I love that. That's even better. I love it.
So a wild rose is one that hasn't been pruned. It's one that hasn't been cultivated, hasn't been domesticated. It hasn't been controlled by outside forces. So wild for me means untamed, untrimmed, untethered, just naturally growing and thriving in its natural habitat, just as it is, untouched, allowed to sprawl out however it wants, allowed to follow its own bent, its own nature. And so when I look at, for women, what does that mean for a woman rewilding? I look at these constraints and ways we have of pruning a woman back, which yes, in some ways, okay, if you prune something back, does it produce more blossoms? Absolutely. And do we really need to view ourselves as created to produce? Constantly producing more blossoms. Is that really the way we want to see ourselves and see womanhood or femininity? Or do we want to be allowed to bloom when we're ready, to blossom when we're ready, to give fruit to as many blossoms as we can hold and sustain, without artificially fertilizing? Right? Because if you prune a rose bush back so that it produces more blossoms, you have to give it outside fertilizer. A wild rose needs no extra fertilizer because she only gives off as many blossoms and blooms as the plant can hold, as she can sustain. And so I'm not against, pruning back part of us so that we can produce, or, there's some nuance here. But for me, rewilding is about guiding ourselves, guiding women, into allowing ourselves to thrive as we are in our natural habitat, to embrace that we're good enough. Our process is good enough. We can root and thrive right here. We don't have to be pruned back and controlled or domesticated or controlled, made to look or appear a certain way. So yeah, I think that's like in a nutshell, kind of trying to like make sure I peel back the minutes on this explanation.
I know. These could each be their own podcast episode, and maybe that will be how we go about it one day. But I love the idea of the rose, because that's how I view it as well. I also view it as like the wild stallion, right? The wild horses. Like, have you ever watched a wild horse versus a domesticated horse? Have you ever watched the way it's, and right. Yes, of course you have.
Kicked by one.
Of course you have. Okay. Of course. Amanda has lived many, many lives in the midst of one life. I swear to God, she's got the most magical stories. And I can't wait for you to write a book one day, because I'm just dying to get my hands on it. Because I feel like we've been friends and we talk about all these different pieces. And every time I talk to you, I learn something new about you. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so fascinating. Wow. Yes. So you look at a wild horse, wild horses. I know time boundaries. You look at a wild horse and you look how they behave and how they move and how, like, what they're thinking about and what they're focused on, and how uncaged they really are and how they can't be controlled. You can try, and you do eventually break them down if you're going to domesticate them, but and that's what the system can do, but
or you can gentle them.
Yeah. But it's
You
this
can
beautiful thing
break
of
a horse, or you can gentle.
But it's also, you don't need to. It's like this. And if I get why we do, I'm not going literal about this, going very much metaphorical here, but it's this, you try to control them and there's a fight back there. Yeah. They're in this space of, but I don't need you. I'm good. I'm thriving. I'm living. I'm experiencing. And that's where their joy and their power comes from. And so when I look at women who have been caged and conditioned and programmed and broken down, quite honestly, from such a young age, the things that we're taught, the things that are said to us, the way that we should be, like, I have chills on my whole body. And we've all been through that in different aspects, depending on the culture and society that we've been raised in. But rewilding is peeling back the layers and thawing the icebergs around your heart, around your womb, around your energetic field, around your body, so that you come back to the intrinsic nature of, but I'm already free. I'm whole, I am free, and I am worthy in this exact moment in time. I just have to remember, and I have to re-access that. I don't need to get it from an external source. I get it from actually coming back home within me, from returning back to my roots and to my womb, which we're going to talk about next. So it's this, we all, I think, are very much conditioned and trained to believe that our power comes from external, especially through religion, and in different aspects. 11:11, of course it is. It's like it's all external, but rewilding is coming back to it actually is all within you already. We just have to create the space and the safety and the permission and relearn how to access that wisdom within our own bodies and that freedom within our own bodies, that we're already free. We always have been, if we would only remember.
Yes. Oh, I'm feeling this, Olivia. Oh, yes. Absolute chills.
Yes.
It's an unshackling.
Beautiful.
It's an unshackling. And I love actually that you use the metaphor of horses and the breaking, because when you gentle a horse, you leave it wild. You don't take the wild out of a horse when you gentle it. The gentling process is more just creating relationship, creating trust with a horse. And the horse learns to be gentle with you.
Which is interesting, because that's really what gentle parenting is, if you think about it. If you look at it through that lens. So creating a relationship with your child, trusting their wild, their sovereignty, trusting their process. And you've got this, like you said, gentling versus let me break you, let me condition you, let me fit you into this box of what a kid is supposed to be like and how a good child is.
And for women listening, if you have been broken, there is absolutely hope for you to rewild and to regain your sovereignty, to be able to, as Olivia was putting it, to really, to unshackle, to unchain yourself. And I, as a young girl, was broken and had my will very harshly and traumatically broken, absolutely broken. And it took me years to find the way to put my will back together, to find myself. And it is absolutely possible. Like, we're not, Olivia and I aren't sharing this from a place of, oh, we were raised in this way. We weren't raised to be wild women who were honored and revered in our expression. We were domesticated and caged and broken. And
Amen.
if as broken as I was, if I can come to where I am today, it's absolutely possible for you. And if that term broken feels activating to you, like to hear about having a will broken, if that brings up, visions or memories from your childhood, I want you to know that it doesn't make you less than. Those experiences don't dictate your worth. They don't dictate your potential, and they don't define you. And that's really our heart in rewilding and bringing that to women, is we want to bring this to women who are looking for a way to, and again, it kind of comes back to that new paradigm. We want to not just heal the ways we've been broken and rewild ourselves, but we want to be able to usher in this new paradigm where we're raising up our sons and daughters to where they don't have to be broken. They don't have to be broken. They don't have to have their will stripped from them. That the strong-willed child can be allowed to be wild, and it can be gentle, just like Olivia shared.
And I think it's important to remember, although, we might break a horse or you might feel broken in certain aspects, your inherent, truest, purest essence is whole. And it always has been, right? So it's returning to your wholeness that has always been and will forever be. Right. And it's not something you earn or, destination your way back to. It's a process of remembering, oh my God, like I am whole and I am free and I am powerful. And so the times where my brokenness shows up, or these, ways that I've been broken, or these memories or these visions or this trauma shows up for me, can I hold myself there? And it's loving and honoring and using grace and compassion your way back to remembering your inherent wholeness as well.
Absolutely. It's like that both and of our will was broken, and yet we can never truly be broken.
Amen.
It's like, it's that both and, learning to hold space for the reality of being raised in such a way that you were broken, right? Yeah. And yet at the same time, knowing no one can take this from me.
Which brings me to our next term that I want to go into beautifully. There's 3 more words I want to try to get to if we can. The next one being sovereign. What does being sovereign and our sovereignty, Amanda, in your work, what does it mean to you? Because we use, that word gets used a lot in the online space, especially now. So let's break it down for them. 100%. It all has.
For me, sovereign means that I am autonomous. It means that I am my own authority, ultimately, for me. Ultimately, based on my story and where I'm coming from, the lens that I see this word through, and the way in which I apply it to me first, is that I am my own authority. I don't need someone above me to tell me what to do and how to run my life. That's not to say that I don't thrive in community, but I do not have to submit to someone else's doctrines or dictates over me. And I come from a background where I was taught that a woman was not her own authority. A woman only had authority over children. Yep. And she only had authority over the female children because at some point that male child eventually became a man, and then he was considered an authority over her.
Right.
Not sure when that transition happened. It was never made clear. But I was taught that the man had authority over me, that at first it was my father, and that when I got married, he literally would transfer his authority over me to my husband. That was part of the wedding ritual, that he would transfer his authority over me to my husband, who would then be the man with authority over me. And if I wasn't living at home with my father, and if I wasn't married, then whatever church I was attending, that pastor and those leaders, those men had authority over me.
And God with on the outside, Sky Daddy.
Oh, ultimately, God always had authority over me, but that didn't necessarily matter, because I didn't have access to God's authority anyways.
Right.
Without going through a man.
Yes.
Not to say that I couldn't pray. I was encouraged to pray directly to God, but I couldn't act on anything God told me to do without running it by my man, whether that was my father, my pastor, or my husband.
Can I just say I picture this sometimes of like these men in a room and they've got the like big whiteboard out and they've got the little push pins and then the thread, and it's like trying to weave it all together and make all of this make sense. Like, okay, how do we break these people and make them believe and keep us the power and our egos and we've got the money and we've got the control, and then we like somehow make them believe all of this. And I just picture that because, you know, again, whole other episode, but they could go into like the Gnostic Gospels and, you know, they pull the Mary Magdalene out like, oh, women can't have power. Women can't trust themselves. Okay, take that one out. Okay, now we're going to weave this and this is going to go over here. And then that's because
right. And
none
they're
of
like,
it.
uh-oh, what do we do with this verse that says, I wish that you all would prophesy?
Because then it just, none of it makes sense when you start to say it out loud. And so I just picture
women
them.
and all.
Yeah, little asterisks.
Yes,
disclaimer.
Right. Not women. You all would prophesy, but not the women.
How many different versions of
silent, and if they have questions, ask their husbands at home.
That's right. Asterisk here. Okay, add this one line in there. Delete that one. Okay, you know, carry the 5. Little move the decimal. Like I can't. It's
like long division. So for me, sovereign gives me the permission, right, to not go to a man for permission to move on what I inherently know, intuitively know is true for me, is right for me, what I'm being called to, whether that's I feel God moving me towards something or if it's instinctual, because as I embody God within me, my humanity and my divinity can't really be separated. I am holy. And if I decide to move a certain way in the world, I have made a sovereign decision to move in a holy way. I have permission because I'm sovereign. I don't have to ask for a blessing from outside of me because the blessing lives within me because I am sovereign. And I would love to now spotlight your definition of sovereign, because I'm checking the time and I'm like, okay, we want to move from sovereign on. And so
9 minutes.
Basically, for me, it's that I don't have to submit to some outside authority over me to tell me that what I'm feeling is right and to give me permission to move on what I know is true for me.
I want to do all the praise hands and the hallelujahs and the amens, which brings us right back to our Christian roots. Okay. Oh, so powerful. And mine will be short because it's very similar to yours. I will always think of what Madison, one of our mentors, Madison Morrigan, defines it as of sovereignty is belonging to ourselves and belonging together. So being in community, but ultimately belonging to yourself. It's being an individual within a whole, being an individual within a collective. And it means to me being anchored in your own center, really being rooted in the seat of your own power. So it's this, I'm anchored, I'm centered, I'm filled up with my own energy. I'm taking up all of my own space and then belonging in community from that anchor point versus somebody tell me who to be, somebody tell me what's right, somebody tell me what's the truth, somebody tell me how to feel. Okay, am I caretaking everyone? Am I rescuing everyone? Like being very wounded feminine. And instead unhooking from that, coming back into myself and what is truth for me, what is resonance for me, and coming into relationship from that space. Absolutely. The autonomous part, the authority part, the belonging to yourself, quite honestly, and then how that shows up in community, because we are obviously created for community as well.
I love that encapsulation and summary. It's so beautiful and so well understood in so few words. Like that was so beautiful. It's really an embodied sovereignty.
Exactly.
And I don't know what the next term is that you want to go to, but you mentioned the wounded feminine. And I think it could be good to kind of define what does that mean? There are women who are coming to the podcast who may not be used to this term. What does wounded feminine mean exactly?
See, that's like its whole episode, because that's going into masculine versus feminine, wounded versus sacred.
Okay, we could put
we're gonna leave a little teaser for you guys, a little taste. You get just a little dribble, and now you got to come back for more because you're just gonna love it. I feel like I'm the girl at Costco handing out the samples. If you just got a little sample, you better come back for the next one. So we actually have an episode that we recorded a while back on the feminine, some kind of debunking. So I'll make sure to share that one soon. So everyone stay tuned for more on that, and then we'll record a longer episode. But the next term that I want to go into with our timing, because we really do both use this word a lot and refer to this a lot, of the womb space, the womb den, the womb consciousness. Let's unpack that very, very briefly. For those who are like, but why? Or like, why does that even matter? What are you even talking about? Versus just like this anatomical thing that's in our body.
Right. Like, why does the womb matter so much? What's the benefit for me in connecting to, quote unquote, connecting to my womb space? And what does it mean to have relationship with my womb or to live from, I love it.
Especially because it always gets referred to in terms of just birthing children. So like a baby grows there, but like, what if I don't want kids, or what if I already had kids, or what if I'm not sure
what if I'm infertile?
Yep.
What does that mean? What is the benefit for me? What does it mean? So for me, the womb space is such a dynamic space within the body. And I think many of us, at least coming to the podcast to listen, by now have assumably, again, this is kind of assuming, have learned that there is almost more of a brain in the heart and the gut than there is in the brain. Well, the same is true for the womb space. There's so much more energy here than we have traditionally been led to believe. Traditionally, everything happened in the brain. And even in Christianity, when I was taught spiritual discernment, it basically looked like figuring things out logically from a headspace.
Or having an external voice tell you. The Holy Spirit. Yeah.
Lean back against some type of information and knowledge in order to come up with an answer. And that's, to figure something out, basically, is what discernment. It is usually like a furrowing of the brow, like, discerning.
Yeah. When I think of like the masculine, okay, which again, we're going to go into that in a future episode. When I think of that, I think of more the logic, obviously also like the consciousness and the nothingness of just that deep sense of knowing in the stillness. There's that, but then there's also, to me, the logical, where the women come in and the feminine comes in with like the feeling and the flow and the intuition of like, there's something that I'm experiencing in my body right now that's telling me.
That is the womb space.
Yes.
And that was what was kept out of traditional Christianity specifically. And I keep mentioning Christianity because this is my background and where I come from. And so it's easy for me to draw on that as, an example of ways that women have been suppressed. There are obviously so many other ways that women have been suppressed in this way. It's just the way that I have experienced personally.
Myself as well, yes.
And so for whoever's listening, if you weren't raised in Christianity, feel free to, fill in the blanks with whatever resonates for you, the ways that you yourself have experienced being cut off from your intuition.
Through
so
culture,
we were taught in this religion of Christianity very much through a male lens. And so there's nothing wrong with a man discerning with his logic. But because men controlled the narrative and they were the authority, women were cut off from our source of authority. Is not in our head. It's actually in our womb space. That is actually where our discernment happens. It's a guttural, visceral, primal, mystical, intuitive, wild and untamed sense of knowing. It's more like the energetic and spiritual, that mother's intuition that there's, most people have heard about. You just know. You don't know why you know. Wait, pause. I haven't heard my child in a moment. Logically, this would be a good thing. Intuitively, I feel I need to go check on my child. Right. And there's a difference between fear of, oh no, what's wrong with my child? And just that intuitive. How many times as a woman, listening to this podcast, how many times as a woman have you felt something that you just knew?
And you couldn't explain it.
Right. But then maybe logic came in and talked you out of it. Right. So for a woman, for her to come down into her womb space, I mean the energetic space of her womb. So even if you don't have a physical womb, energetically, this is still the place where you create. A woman's pelvis is literally a female pelvis. A female pelvis is shaped differently than a man's. You can look this up, Google it. Don't recommend Googling things, but this you can.
Yeah. Use DuckDuckGo. Just kidding.
Use DuckDuckGo. Female pelvis is literally shaped differently than a male pelvis. It's wider. Everything about the female pelvis is literally designed to create new life. And so even if you never give birth, I've personally never given birth, but I use my womb space that was created to give new life. I use it to create new life. I'm constantly creating, and not that I don't have times of rest, but it's birthed out of me. And that is what this womb space was literally designed for. And so when I say womb space, I'm talking about the more, I'm trying not to use big words like esoteric.
That's okay. Yeah, but it is. It's
like
we're trying to esoteric. We're
trying to break this down into, layman's terms, but it's very much a mystical, energetic, intuitive thing. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But even just the fascia, the nerves, everything comes together here within the womb space.
And so it is very much like the physical, anatomical, biological aspect. And you can like the magic of it there. And this like deeply energetic and spiritual, esoteric space of like, wait, but some of it can't be explained, but it's felt. And it's a common experience when women are connected to it. And what I mean by that is so often we are conditioned it's a culture thing, very cultural. It's Emily and Yolanda of the Radical Birth Keeper School and Free Birth Society describe it as a cultural hypnosis that we've been under, where it has disassociated us, has pulled us out of our inner knowing, pulled us out of our power, and pulled us out of our womb space, quite honestly. And it's made us try it 100%, 100% invalidated it. Absolutely. And it's pulled us out of that so that we're numb to it. So much of our culture numbs us out and makes it so that it's quieter. And then it gets almost stifled, but it's still there. So what we're doing in our work, what we're doing with women is thawing and peeling back these layers and softening and creating that sense of safety in the body again, of like, okay, I'm safe, I'm sovereign, I belong to myself, I am my own authority. What's here for me? Even if you don't have a womb anymore, right? Hysterectomies, whatever it might be, you still have this energetic center in your body. It is still very much there, alive and well. And so it's connecting back to the consciousness, the pulse, the life force, the heartbeat that is there, that very primal aspect of you that the English language cannot even put words to, but is felt and is known by a woman who knows herself. And when you connect back into that, you are sovereign. You are creating and birthing a new paradigm. You are rewilding. You are anchored back into the truest essence of who you are. And there's more words in there that I could break down, but we don't have time today. So it really is this, again, biological and anatomical aspect, and also very deeply energetic and felt experience in the body of that intuitive power space that has this death and rebirth every single month, that is constantly renewing itself, constantly emptying out, constantly re-resourcing. Like it's this whole magical, truly part of you that you don't even really have to think about, but it's happening. And it's just starting to anchor back into and explore and play. It's not a science. It's not figuring it out logically. It's coming back into an experience and being in the body with it and like playing with, okay, what's here? Yeah. Whether you plan to have children or you don't, you already did, or wherever, all women, all of the feminine, coming back to the pelvic bowl, coming back to the pelvic root, coming back to the womb, coming back to the yoni, which was the other one I was going to quickly define, if you want to define that quickly for us as we make our way out. But there is a consciousness that lives there and that is rooted there, that is calling you home. As Jasmine Rose, another Rose, Jasmine Rose says of Humble Wild Wellness, she says it's a womb coming. It's a homecoming to the womb. What a different culture we would live in if we all knew that.
It's learning the value of the visceral and intuitive, and learning that it has equal value to the logical. Logical discernment has been revered above intuitive discernment. it's been labeled as, emotional or less than, somehow weak. But there is just as much power and strength in that visceral, intuitive discernment and knowing, which comes from the womb space. It's an equal but different wisdom. And yoni is the Sanskrit name for basically just female genitals. It really encompasses the womb, the vagina, the vulva, all of it. And it also means sacred space. So I love using this, even though it's Sanskrit and I don't speak Sanskrit. I love it because, for one thing, it feels really soft in my mouth when I say 100%. Yoni, more so than vagina. I'm bilingual and language matters a lot to me. And vagina just does, I prefer vulva. I like the ol in it, but yoni to me just sounds softer in the mouth. And I think it's beautiful that it means sacred space versus vagina comes from sheath. And to me, that implies that it was created for the sword to go in, if you know what I mean. So,
well, and it feels very like scientific. Vagina. This is the vagina versus like this is your yoni. Like,
right? It's the way that it sounds. It sounds scientific.
Yeah.
It sounds scientific, right?
Yeah.
Because
a man created it. Let's be honest. A man named it. We don't.
And I think language is important, and using the word yoni, sacred space, not only does it sound nice in the mouth, but it reminds us that this is a sacred space. It's important for us to name it as such so that we can remember to value and revere it and honor it as such. And something else that we touched on that I think we could just briefly, the armoring that happens to separate us from our womb space. And armoring, I'm just going to read this real quick. Armoring can be defined as chronic patterns of involuntary tension in the body that dampen or block emotional expression, alter perception of both the outer and the inner psychological world, diminish or eliminate kinesthetic awareness and other sensations, and resist range of motion and movement. And that's thanks to Green and Goodrich Dunn. But I think that is just a beautiful explanation of what we mean by armoring. It prevents movement. It prevents flow. It prevents connection on a physical level, as well as on an energetic and emotional level. And the rewilding that we talked about earlier, right, is part of coming back into the womb and de-armoring our body, our womb, our vulva, our vagina, our yoni, right? De-armoring these places so that we can connect softness to softness, like to honey.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. So I just with closing kind of wanted to add that in.
So I invite you all, if this is new to you, if this is, old news to you, wherever you fall on the spectrum of, and the continuum, quite honestly, of understanding and learning what it means to reclaim and revere what it means to be a woman, to be rewilded. I would invite you, what is your womb communicating with you? What is your yoni communicating with you? What is your body communicating with you? Your softness, your bleed, how sex feels. When do you touch yourself, right? Do you touch and do you feel comfortable touching the inner tissues of the vulva, right? Do you feel comfortable there? Do you feel comfortable with your own sensations, with your own juices, right? Like what is your relationship and connection to, and what is your body and your spirit communicating to you through how you interact and are in relationship with yourself? And take this slowly, create safety for yourself, soften and ground into it, breathe through it. Your breath is your barometer, as Jasmine always says. This is just an invitation even to just think about it. And then as you think about it, can you drop in and down and start to feel about it and really feel into, from the body, from the womb space, your relationship there, and potentially where you're being invited to explore, to deepen, or to soften within your relationship. There is what I'll leave you with.
Beautiful invitation, Olivia.
Amanda, one more time, where can people find you? And as always, thank you, my friend, for being here and for being such a regular on all the podcast projects that I create and birth. And I just always so look forward to our conversations and to what we explore together.
I do too. I even love the conversations we don't manage to record. That afterwards we're like, oh dang, that should have been a podcast.
100%.
People should have been a fly on the wall for that. People can find me on Instagram at Amanda Arlene Rose, all spelled out all together, no dots or dashes. And they can find me on my website, www.wholenessmirroring.com.
Beautiful.
You can also find me at theselfembodiedwoman.com. I'm shifting my URL over. And so they can find it there as well. But the link in my bio would just take them right now. Everything reroutes to wholenessmirroring.com. And that's a better way of communicating with me. I keep social media on a separate device. So you can reach out to me on Instagram, but I want to invite you to come to my little corner of the interwebs and drop me a line through my website. There's a little chat box, or you can send me an email.
And subscribe to your newsletter. Subscribe to your newsletter. It's so juicy.
Olivia recently subscribed, so if she says you should, then you should.
You should. It really is like, if I was drinking right now, which right now I know I'm not, and I know you're not either. I got all tongue twisted there, but like really pour yourself an old fashioned, have a little like spicy bourbon, sit down and just like let the words be medicine. Like your emails are like a whole experience. It's not just reading some words on paper. It's like you're feeling it, quite honestly, in the body. And it just feels like the smoothest bourbon going down, which is so good.
Thank you for that reflection, Olivia. I actually recently decided to change the way I did my emails, and I take a lot more time. I'll take a whole day to write one email at times, or even a whole weekend.
It's felt.
So I really am nurturing those, and thank you for that reflection. So yes, please come join my community, my newsletter. I would love to connect with you. Thank you so much, Olivia, for hosting me.
I love you so much. We will see you guys next time. You can find me at thewombden.com, at thewombden on Instagram. As always, everything will be in the show notes. Let us know what you want to hear about next time. Amanda will, of course, and always be back. So let us know what you're wanting us to unpack together and unearth together next. Until next time, we are sending you so much love, and we'll see you on the other side.